This video talks about death and bereavement as a result of blood cancer. If you're affected by this, please call our free support line on 0808 2080 888.
The waiting room and we were called in, and I noticed that Rob's Macmillan nurse came in with us, and I thought, well, that's unusual. She doesn't usually join us for these meetings. So he went in and sat down, and this was Rob's hematologist, and the first thing he said was, "Robin, I'm so sorry, but there's nothing more we can do for you. The leukaemia is so aggressive that we cannot halt its progress." And as soon as I heard those words, I lost it totally. I hadn't ever broken down in front of Rob, but I just could not stop sobbing. And that was the reason why the Macmillan nurse was in there, because she thought, okay, I've got to deal with a mum here who's hearing this awful news. So she took me out of the room and took me into the side room. So I left Mark in the room with Robin. So I'll be honest, I don't know exactly what happened with Robin and the doctor that was in there at the time, because I just couldn't deal with it. I thought, this is what happens to other people. It doesn't happen to us. I was hoping they were going to say, yeah, we'll come in for a next lot of chemo, or you'll have the stem cell, you might be in over Christmas. We were quite happy, prepared to do that. We'll just be up here with him, we'll stick with it through Christmas. And then to receive that news, it was like there's just no hope anymore. And I believe, Rob came in with his dad. Mark looked grey. Rob just came in and we just hugged. And we just stood there for a few minutes. And he said, all I wanted to be was a dad. He didn't want the world. He just wanted what everybody else wanted. And it was just so sad to see that being taken away from him. He tried so hard. And the Macmillan nurse said to me, she said, we were astounded that Rob has got this far. It's only the fact that he was so fit that he got this far. And you think that's so ironic, isn't it? He looks so fit on the outside, but it's the inside that's doing the damage. Then we had to come home and we had to tell the family. I can remember ringing Toby, and he was in one of the aisles in our local co-op, and he could hear me crying. He thought, this isn't good. So he came straight home, and Rob was just so matter of fact. He said, there's nothing more they can do for me. They've told me I'm going to die. And that was just awful, just horrible to hear that. So again, had to tell the family. My sister came straight round with her husband, my wonderful sister Di, brother-in-law Dave. They came straight round, and we then had to tell my parents, who were getting older. So that was just an awful, awful day. We did go back the following week, but there were no clinical trials viable for Robin, and if he had more treatment, the chances of survival had dropped to about 5%. So Rob then had to make the decision to have palliative care, because that was all that was left open for him. So that's what he chose to do. That's a hard decision for a 24-year-old boy, or not a boy, man, to have to make. But that is the stark choice, unfortunately. There's not always a happy ending. But from then on, he took charge of his life, if you like. We didn't have to come back to the London hospital. We were then transferred to our Colchester hospital, and he had the rest of his treatment there, which basically involved blood transfusions and things like that. But unfortunately, the white blood cell count kept going up. So when we first got back home, he was told that he'd have months to live, but unfortunately, within about a couple of weeks, that had been reduced down to, you've got weeks to live. So it's just horrible it's like a dream world. That's the only way I can describe it. You're going through the motions of living, knowing that you're going to lose your son at some point, and you just don't know when. So that was awful. How was your news with Matthew?
Well, Matthew had relapsed in the September. So he had a brain tumor and was in another London hospital where they specialized in that and took it out. It was in the cerebellum in the back. And it took them nearly a week to discover that it was a relapse of the leukemia. And so he had two more courses of chemo, during which we met in the October. And then they said, come back again after Christmas when we hope to give you a bone marrow stem cell, whatever, transplant. And so we went home for Christmas, and that was, yeah. And then he came home, and he said, I don't feel very well. So, which is normally the time when you feel the best after chemo. He did not feel good. So we went into Colchester Hospital as well. And there they did another bone marrow biopsy and discovered that the last chemo hadn't worked. So they told us in a side room. Unfortunately, Matthew's sister had come up as well. So we were all together. And so we were told by the hematologist and a nurse, and all Matthew said was, well, that's it then. And they asked what he was going to do that day when he gets home, and he said, we're going to decorate the Christmas tree. And so that's what we did, although he did not really feel up to it. He was quite weak. And then he still tried to learn the ukulele, which was new to him. And then 7 days later, he suddenly had a nosedive in the night, and 8 days after the discharge from Colchester, he died.